Hi, guys. Welcome to the Simple Doesn't Mean Easy podcast. We are here weekly, every Monday and Friday. We're working at simplifying things in our lives, one day at a time, one simple step at a time. And together, guys, we can do this. I'm your host, Michelle Visser. And this week, we are wrapping up the story. And I'm giving you the rest of the story that I promised you in last Monday's episode. Also, we had a whole week of technical difficulties. And if you noticed, we went a week 2 weeks ago without an episode. And sorry about that. We had already recorded the ones that you heard last week. And that's why they didn't even mention that, oh, sorry, we just randomly skipped a week. So if you missed us, sorry. If you didn't miss us, then that's okay too. But I missed you guys. I missed being here. And I appreciate that you guys make time to include me in your day in some way. So I also want to tell you that before we wrap it up today, I'm going to announce a couple giveaway winners. So stay tuned for that. Before we go much further into this episode, I want to pause for a second. I want to tell you about an announcement I just read recently from the USDA. They said that due to the high feed costs and the overall crazy inflation that we're seeing, the American beef industry has hit a record low. Beef cattle inventory has dropped to the lowest levels we've seen since the 1970s. As it is, I buy very little meat at the grocery store because I know you cannot trust the label. Even if it says a product of the USA, it's probably imported meat. The reality is that your meat probably came here in a container ship filled with frozen carcasses killed on the other side of the planet. But as long as it's been altered or sliced in any minute way in the US, they can put that sticker on it and label it product of the US. So, this USDA report, combined with what I already knew about the fact that our meat is not actually American grown meat, I decided I really needed to introduce you to someone. If you would like to go back to the days when you could buy a share of beef from a local farmer, you need to meet Tyler and Taylor Real. They run a small family farm business and they raise high quality, nutrient rich beef that you can trust and you can feel confident feeding your family. Their cows are 100% grass fed and finished, regeneratively raised on rotating pastures and raised by Tyler and Taylor themselves. And they care deeply about leaving the land better than they found it. So you can feel good about giving your hard earned dollar to folks who care about what you feed your family as much as you do. You can do a bulk beef share and you can literally stock your freezer with the best meat for your family. And there's no mystery. I love it that they itemize exactly what you're getting. And then you have no hassle either of any of the crazy subscriptions you might look into. And there's no need to wonder what's for dinner all the time because you can stock your freezer with this great meat and know you're feeding your family the best. If you're not ready to commit to like a beef share, but you want to check out the great things that Tyler and Taylor are doing, you actually can try a sample box. They have set up a special offer just for my followers. You can go to solelyrested.com/beef, BEEF, and check out that offer. Take advantage of it and also see more information about what the beef shares are like and what Tyler and Taylor are doing to make things as close as it can be to going to your local farmer and ordering some beef. Also, I want to make sure you know what's going on over at solelyrested.com/make it. Go check it out, guys. There's an amazing giveaway going on. And guess what? Some of this grass fed beef, this amazing food, is included in this large giveaway that we are hosting. On top of that, you get 10 amazing pantry staple recipes. Pantry staples you don't need to rely on the food store for, but instead you can make it home and you can make it better. So please go to solelyrested.com/make it, and I will see you there. 2 Mondays ago, I had talked about how our family became accidental homesteaders. We knew we wanted a simpler life, but we had no idea that we were going to wind up diving into all that we have in the past decade. And I hope that that gives you some encouragement that if you have a major dream and you've been striving towards it, I'm certain you're going to get there, because here we were not even knowing what we were doing and wound up being accidental homesteaders. We knew we wanted to slow down. We knew we wanted to have more nature and less traffic. We lived in a very congested suburban area right below Philly, and we knew we wanted more quiet and less noise. But it was a long time pursuing our dream of getting nowhere. I explained more about that last Monday. But we felt, Bill, that needed to pursue being an entrepreneur. And I had told my kids, like, for years, that entrepreneurship is really the way to go. If you have the right mindset, the right personality for it, entrepreneurship is exciting and so rewarding. And I'd homeschooled my daughters for 20 years. And often we built our days around one or two or three different daughters' entrepreneurial efforts that they had going on at the time. They had a really thriving one had a really thriving jewelry making business. One had an even more thriving dog cookie business that was very popular. She had 12 monthly customers and she had three retail locations that she was, well, I shouldn't say she was carting the dog cookies to. Her and I were carting her packaged dog cookies to all these locations every week. And it was such a good experience for her. Another daughter had a great business of making desserts for people when they ordered special cookies and other items. And she also ran robotics camps to raise money. And anyway, I could go on and on. But for Bill, his effort to reach this one particular entrepreneurial goal just kept falling through. So then the new life that we found ourselves in was like, we waited and waited and waited, and suddenly, boom, we were there. It was crazy how quickly it fell into place when it did. And of course, having waited all that time, we were ready. We were just anxious and eager. And when the new life started to unfurl, we realized we had more than we had ever dreamed of. We had an old farmhouse that had been built in like 1800, which, by the way, I don't know if that's really a great dream come true or kind of a curse. There's so many issues with old houses. And we've learned a lot about its history over the years, which has been really fun. But, just bits and pieces here and there. It's fascinating, but I wish I knew more of the story of our house. Um, Actually, let me know if you'd like an episode about that sometime, about our house and the stories I do know about it. It's really pretty interesting when you find out some things about a house built in 1800 or thereabouts. Um, anyway, so we had lived here for a few months, and well, Bill, by the way, I should say, was not an entrepreneur. We moved here with him, staying in the same career he had been in, just finding a new company to work for. And we just realized, okay, that's just not going to happen. At least that's what we thought. There's more to that story. But we had lived here probably a few months and we realized, wait, like it took us that long to realize it. Like, wait, this probably was a working farm for a century and a half. Like, all around us, oh, I just hit my mic. These fields were used for growing crops or raising livestock. Like, I don't know why it took us a few months to realize this, but generations of family had been growing their food and raising animals here. And we realized that we had a dilapidated building that was probably a duck house that we now use as a chicken coop. And there was a even more dilapidated building that we rebuilt as a stable for our milk cow. And we set up an area for meat rabbits in our barn. But, so through all this, we're building up this homestead like really quickly that we hadn't even knew was coming. But Bill, like I said, was still not working for himself. Meanwhile, I started building up a little entrepreneurial effort for myself that I didn't even realize what I was doing. Like I just started a blog and started writing about what I was doing, what I was learning. And suddenly, well, not suddenly, I shouldn't say suddenly, over the course of a few years, I realized, okay, this is kind of something I'm building. And then I started realizing, okay, it's actually an entrepreneurial effort. I have a brand, and how can I build that? In fact, we did a whole season, I think it was season 2, all about being an online content creator, if that's something you would like to know more about. That was a fun season. So, but now fast forward another 5, 6-ish years, and suddenly both of us own our own businesses and we both employ others. And we both help, together to run our small farm too. So it's just amazing how it has snowballed and built and grown, and I feel very blessed. Um so in the beginning, before I had any clue what I was doing and I was just writing, some of those early posts that were really popular and are still visited a lot today are like the history of our wide plank floors in our home and a recipe for strawberry pie. In fact, I just celebrated just a few days ago, as the time I'm recording this, my very first blog post I ever posted. So I see that as the beginning of Solely Rested. And I wrote that, I posted it on May 14th, 2014. And it was all about how I choose to be thankful. And that's still a theme that I'm working on, honestly. So I kind of love it that that was the first thing I wrote about. So, okay. Last podcast episode, I mentioned there was one summer morning when I opened my Bible under the shade of a maple tree and hear 16 years later how much that moment is still impacting me. So that's what we're going to talk about today. When I open my Bible, this is the verse that I read. It's from Jeremiah 6:16. Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is and walk in it, and you will find rest for your soul. So I've written in depth about, I shouldn't say in depth. I wrote an article about this post or this verse itself. So I'm just going to pull that up now and I'm going to share that with you. The first day of our long journey to our new life, I discovered a verse that was new to me. It eventually became the focus of a simple craft that holds immeasurable value to me. And I'm going to show that to you, by the way, at the end of this episode. If you are over on YouTube. If not, I'll describe it to you. But over the years, I have read, reread, and dissected Jeremiah 6:16. First of all, okay, I just realized since I'm reading this, it's not going to make sense because there's these headings. So I'm breaking down the different phrases or words in the verse. First of all, ask. I noticed there were lots of action verbs: stand, look, ask, and walk. But one was repeated twice. How important that one is to ask. He'll direct our paths one way or another, with us following wholeheartedly or with us kicking and screaming while we are being pushed, with us meekly asking and cautiously following, or with us going out of our own way, mapping a misinformed course, but being forced through painful detours, sideswipes, and head on collisions, possibly, into the path that God has marked out for us. Proverbs 16:9 says, "The heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps." So, guys, we just have to ask. Then there's the ancient paths. At a new junction in our lives, God often calls us to look back. It's good to consider the tried and true ways that our ancestors who loved the Lord, if we were blessed enough to have such a heritage, it's good to consider their ways. Sitting in my backyard that August morning with my Bible open across my tan legs and my thoughts falling all over the place, they first fell on Bill's paternal grandmother. She was the one who charted our family's path to New England long ago when she purchased her unassuming cottage that was nestled under tall pine trees. Little did I know that the home that God would lead us to 5 years and 9 months later. So I didn't explain. I must have explained in the previous article. Let me pause. That cottage I was referring to was a summer cottage. And once we had children, from the time the girls were little, we would go there for family vacation, often two, maybe even three times during the summer. So that was a cottage we went to often. And our girls basically grew up knowing no other vacation than going to New England, all because of Bill's paternal grandmother. Um, Little did I know the home that God would lead us to would be one built 215 years before we ever laid eyes on it, one full of stories, one built when our country's first president was still alive, one that was built only two short decades after our country was a country at all. Talk about ancient paths. And then there's the phrase stand at the crossroads. We stood at very confusing crossroads for quite a while. We were blessed and content where we were, but God was pointing us down an unknown path. Parents and other relatives did not understand why we were even considering such a path, one that would mean leaving family and friends and a perfect home and our native state behind. But as Christians, we have a guidebook. We have a direct line to the best direction giver ever. He's on call 24/7 and he's already mapped out our days. We need to seek his directions through the simple acts of studying his word and talking to him in prayer. That's how we call on him when we're at a confusing crossroad. That's how we know if we're following God's direction. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding, and in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. Yet sometimes our friends and family are his mouthpieces, but sometimes their words, as well meaning as they may be, contradict what we're studying in the Bible, or they're an antithesis to the joy and the peace that we feel when we're prayerfully working through our choices. At those times, we need to simply listen to God's direction. But there are other crossroads in our story, crossroads I didn't even know about until we had lived in our new home for many months. But God knew that our home would be our home back on that summer day when I had sat under the maple tree reading Jeremiah 6:16 for the first time. And when I was reading about standing at a crossroad, long before I knew it, God knew that our home would sit on an old crossroad. There's an elongated Y shape where one road, the road that bends around the lake, turns to the right, and another road forges ahead. It's an old, ill used service road that has since merged with our property. So we now own what used to be a service road. When I found that Y on an antiquated map, I could not believe the name of the old road that no longer exists. It had been christened the very same name as my mother's father. It was a very unusual name, to be sure. So I was just blown away that our new God appointed home sits at a crossroad in a state where my husband's paternal grandmother had first drawn our family, and where a service road bears the unusual name of my maternal grandfather. I don't think it's coincidence, guys. And then the phrase walk in it. He will direct, but he will expect us to do a lot of active work. He gives no promises that life will be easy. I've cried many tears over the complications inherent in following God's direction that led to our New England homestead. It has been a difficult process. My oldest, now in her second year of college, well, this was when I wrote this a long time ago. She now has two children and has been married for 4 years, 5 years, 5 years. Okay. Anyway, back to what I was reading. My oldest, now in her second year of college, was only 12 when we thought we'd be moving in just a few months. My youngest, close to a teenager when we moved, was only 5 when God first pulled on our hearts and called us to move hundreds of miles away. And life is far from perfect now. In fact, to be honest, the time we have lived here has housed some of the deepest grief and the seemingly insurmountable difficulties that our family could possibly face. On top of that, the barn roof leaks, the clapboards need replacing, and every old floorboard creaks. But we know with certainty that we paved the path to our new home by following God's direction. So the destination, as imperfect as it is also perfect. But none of it's been easy. In the years that span since that memorable vacation day until the day that we settled on our New England home, He's asked me to do many things that I was completely unqualified to do, and they were hard. 2 Corinthians 4:7 tells us we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all surpassing power is from God and not from us. Because that's where He wants us. He wants us to realize that everything we've accomplished is because He's been there with us and He's been the one giving us the talents and the abilities and the possibilities that we need to accomplish what we have. He asked me to learn how to analyze a business's gross value, write a business plan, talk with financial and real estate professionals that I felt totally inadequate talking to, and sell a house for sale by owner when I had no real estate knowledge. And my husband was living 400 miles away at the time. So all that was kind of hard. Then fast forward to the past 10 years of living here, and I can't even list for you the complications that we faced. All of that to say, life's never easy, guys. It's never easy. Okay. He also asked me to be uncomfortable and share with others during those 5 years and 9 months that we were living in Delaware and knowing we were supposed to move, but not being able to move. And he would lay it on my hearts to occasionally share with others what was happening. I would tell friends and sometimes strangers that we were certain God was directing us to do something, even though every door was closing and nothing made sense. It was humbling, actually embarrassing, if I'm honest, to share this story, not knowing if we would ever truly move or if I would instead just look like a fool going nowhere really, really slowly. The next phrase, you will find rest. This is a thing, guys. You will find rest. Rest is an absolute, it's a given. He may never show me why he asked me to do so many uncomfortable, extremely difficult things. He will never show me probably why it took so long, but he gave us absolute assurance that our home here in New England is the exact spot where he wants our family. That's actually another story. It's amazing details, but we are certain beyond belief. This is where we're supposed to be right now in this time of our lives. He had two different people independently approach me as we were packing to move and tell me that my testimony meant so much to them personally many years prior, how my testimony impacted their lives, and my story of following God's direction in the midst of having no idea where, why, or how God was actually going to wind up leading us. So that was pretty cool. And then the phrase for your soul. God doesn't promise a Caribbean vacation kind of rest. Honestly, his rest is better, though. He promises rest for your soul. It's a rest that surpasses understanding. Isaiah 40:31 says, those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. It's a rest that you can sink your heels down deep into, one you can lean on with any and all energy that you have. Your soul can experience a true, fulfilling, deep rest when you know beyond any doubt that you are where God has led you. That first summer in our New England homestead, I named our homestead Restful Falls Farm. Our homestead sits not only on that crossroad that I described, but it also sits where a lake spills over the dam and into a rocky river. I want to always remember that I will find rest only in following God's direction. I then started writing about our new life on my blog. I named it Solely Rested to remind me that the rest he promises is rest for your soul. I started turning my gardens over with my daughter, that one who was so eager to see our homestead start producing that I mentioned in the last episode. And I dug up a bucketful after bucketful of rocks upon rocks upon rocks. Guys, it is named the Granite State for a reason. There are more rocks in our state than you will find anywhere else in the world, I'm pretty sure. So we're digging up our gardens, and I have bucketfuls of rock. And I made a pile of the prettiest ones. And I added in a couple special stones to my collection, a beautiful purple one that I collected from the cold Massachusetts shoreline many years before that on our very last visit with my husband's beautiful grandmother, the one who had had the cottage here in New Hampshire. And then I added a smooth gray heart shaped rock that I found the first time I visited a New Hampshire beach with my daughters, right after we had moved to our new God appointed home. So I assembled all these treasured rocks into a stones of remembrance. You see, Joshua instructed the Israelites to construct a pile of stones when they crossed the Jordan River into the promised land. And God promised to Abraham, the promised land that God promised to Abraham so many years before. Joshua instructed the Israelites to construct the stones of remembrance because his people need to remember that God promises to lead them and that God keeps his promises. So I decided I needed a stones of remembrance after that long journey of following God's direction. So, first, I do have all of my journaling of the entire, often painful process, and every page recalls a specific detail of God's directions. Yes, years worth of beautiful small stories that add up to an opus of God's direction. And second, I have a literal stones of remembrance that hangs by the front door of our home today. I actually took it down so I could show those of you on YouTube my stones of remembrance. In our move, I brought with me a part of an old orchard box that was stamped with the name of my native hometown, Newark, for Newark, Delaware. It seemed the perfect board to use for making this. So I glued my pile of stones. I assembled them in a way that I thought looked pleasing, kind of going from small to biggest and using the heart one here near the top and the purple one right at the very top. And I used a really strong glue. I have that noted here. I will tell you that in a second in case you want to try doing something kind of crazy like this. um, I glued my pile of stones that I gathered and I paraphrased Jeremiah 6:16 on the rocks. So it's a reminder to us that we are exactly where God has led us and that our God always shows us the good way and he always gives us rest for our souls. The glue is E6000 and I used just a Sharpie, like an extra fine paint pen, a Sharpie paint pen, to write the words. And then I paraphrase them to say, ask for the ancient path, walk in it, and find rest. So there you have it. That is finally the rest of the story, guys. I hope that you found it interesting. More than that, I hope that you found it encouraging in some way. I know that we are all on different paths, we all have different stories. But I do hope that as each of us share our story with each other, that we all find encouragement in somewhere. So I hope that you were able to find some in mine. Thank you for listening. And thank you just for being a part of this journey with our family. Oh, I have to tell you, I told you it before I ended that I would tell you our winners. Okay, I have two winners today. The amazing lavender book. What episode was that? I don't have that in front of me. It was a few episodes back that the lavender farmer came on, Terry Veshy. Such a good episode. I have her book. It's beautiful, a beautiful hardback book all about the amazingness of lavender. And that is for Heart and Soul Family Farm. You get your own copy of this beautiful book, The Lavender Companion by Terry Veshy. So reach out over on Instagram or via my blog, and I will get you your copy. And also, we have another one, The Love Language of the South by Stacey Lynn Harris. Stacey was on episode 101. Really fun talk we had about the family table. The winner of a copy of that is Kimberly, spelt with Lee at the end, Kimberly McCoy. You left a review on March 21st. So reach out to me and I will get you a copy of Stacey's book. So thanks for listening, guys. And remember, it is easy to forget how blessed we are to live this life. So enjoy the simple, everyday efforts. I know it's not easy, but it is a good life.